may be seated. The interment for our beloved Lori will take place immediately following this service at the B'nai Israel Memorial Park on Whitty Road. After the interment, there will be a meal of consolation and an opportunity to call on the family who will begin their Shiva here back at the synagogue. There will be a Shiva minyan in the chapel here at the synagogue at 5:30 p.m. We take comfort from the words of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He has me lie down in green pasture, he leads me beside the still waters. He guides me on paths of righteousness. He revives my soul for the sake of his glory. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff and your rod do comfort me. You set a table in sight of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall abide in the house of the Lord forever. Everyone has a name given to her by God and given to her by her parents. Everyone has a name given to her by her stature and the way she smiles, and given by what she wears. Everyone has a name given to her by the mountains and given to her by her walls. Everyone has a name given to her by the stars and given to her by her neighbors. Everyone has a name given to her by her sins and given to her by her longing. Everyone has a name given to her by her enemies and given by her love. Everyone has a name given to her by her celebrations and given to her by her work. Everyone has a name given by the seasons and given to her by her blindness. Everyone has a name given to her by the sea and given to her by her death. The words of the Hebrew poet Zelda, which I think captures the depth and spirit of a remarkable life, a life that touched so many, a life that made a difference in this world, and that even in death taught us all how to live. That was our wonderful, beautiful Lori. Today is a day that we feared would come, but hoped and prayed that somehow wouldn't. But here we are in this sanctuary to mourn Lori, to weep for the years that were not granted to her, for the dreams cut short, for her inexhaustible zest for life that is no more. We cry out in the spirit of the words of the prophet Yirmiyahu, Mavligiti ale yagon libi davai. My grief is incurable. My heart is sick within me. My dear Charlie, Matthew, Avram, and Joanne, Sam and Kristen, Matthew and Stephen, our hearts go out to you and to everyone who had the privilege of knowing Lori. It is at times like this when the words of the moment fail us. So we turn to the wisdom of our tradition, the words of the ages that speak to us in a whisper of God's comforting presence as we make our way together through the valley of shadow. We pray that these words will be a source of comfort and strength. The words of my teacher, Rabbi Harold Schulweis, come to mind. In sickness and in dying, it is never too late. Living, I teach. Dying, I teach. Had to face pain and fear. Others observed me, children, adults, students of life and death. Learn from my bearing, my posture, my spirit. It is never too late. Some word of mine, some touch, some caress may be remembered. Some gesture may play a role beyond the last movement of my head and hand. Write it on my epitaph, that my loved ones be consoled. It is never too late. When Lori first got cancer, she didn't want people to know. She didn't want her disease to define her. She didn't want to be pitied. And then this second time around, when there was unfortunately no coming back, she never stopped fighting with every fiber of her being. She never complained. She never questioned, why me? And through it all, she was there for Charlie, and he was there for her. In her 69 years on this earth, she squeezed out of her life every ounce of meaning and purpose, every drop of passion and caring, every opportunity for joy and friendship, every chance to give of her generosity, of spirit, of her genuine caring. She was the first to offer help, to give a ride, to bring over quarts of soup in the winter, to deliver candies for the holidays, to be present in your time of need. To experience Lori was to be uplifted by her outgoing, engaging personality, graced by her contagious laugh and positive attitude. She brightened your entire day. Her practical jokes, which were an expression of her love language and her penchant to get a rise out of you, if you were privileged enough for her to play them on you, it meant that you had earned her love. For Charlie, who knew her from high school only to be reunited for 22 happy and wonderful years together, there is, Charlie, in the Jewish tradition, a mystical legend that speaks of a soul, a single soul, having two halves, two interconnected parts. And according to the legend, at the time of birth, the two halves are separated. But at the time of marriage, they are reunited. Charlie, Lori was your palga gufa, your other half, and you were hers. And it was as if your two souls had gotten lost on the path of life, only to finally be reunited in sacred love, extensions of each other, to give each other compatibility of spirit, and a depth of soul and love that not even death can conquer. Lori loved her family, her stepson Matthew, who was like her own child, her brother Avram and sister-in-law Joanne, and her nephews Sam, Matthew, and Stephen, who grew up with Aunt Lori, who were like sons to her, and she was like a second mother to them. We will hear from others shortly. We will hear their thoughts and their memories, which I know will capture much of who Lori was and what she meant to her family and her co-workers and her motorcycle friends and everyone who got to know her. So I want to conclude with a poem of Mary Lee Hall. If I should die and leave you here a while, be not like others, sore undone, who keep long vigils by the silent dust and weep. For my sake, turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something to comfort others' hearts than thine. Complete those unfinished tasks of mine, and I, perchance, may therein comfort you. It is my privilege now to call on others who offer words of love and words of tribute. I'm going to call forward first Avram, Lori's brother.
Rabbi, we will speak, but I must say you captured it quite well. By so many of you coming today, you truly honor my sister Lori. You're also performing the highest mitzvah, commandment, good deed that there is. The commandment, the mitzvah of Levaya, funeral. It means accompaniment. You will accompany her to her resting spot. She cannot reciprocate, and therefore it is the highest honor. Look around this room. There's old, young, different religions, creeds, lifestyles, and yes, leather motorcycle chaps. And why? Because to Lori, it didn't matter who you were, where you came from, or what you did, as long as you were a decent person. Lori basically had 4 lives. Growing up with me and my brother Gary, young adulthood, first marriage, and of course, what I call getting it right the second time with Charlie. 69 years of a life well lived. When Lori was 3, her father, Norman Simon, died, leaving Lori with a single mom and her brother Gary, who was 10. My father, Sam Glassoff, came along with his 2 sons, Mark and Danny, and together it was yours, mine, and ours. When I was born, Lori was 7, and I was told she doted on me and fought to hold me after my bath. She would report that the baby was crying and grab a diaper and a bottle. From the beginning, she was in charge. When I was 7, she was 14 and wanted nothing to do with me. I was a little brother, getting into her stuff, tagging along with her and her friends. Mom, I'm going with my friends. Take your brother with you. All right, come on. And I went, because she was my bigger sister. By the time I was 14, she was in college and out of the house. But those formative years I will never forget. Growing up in the 60s was not easy, especially for a girl who loved sports, played sports, and was as good or even better sometimes than the boys. Title IX, allowing girls more access to school and sports, didn't happen until 1972. Lori said she was born too early. As the story goes, when she started dating, she would go out, they would go, let's say, bowling or ping pong, and she'd beat the boys. My mother would say, and they wouldn't call her back for a second date. My mother would say, Lori, it's okay, let the boys win, it's all right. My sister's response, as you can imagine, no, I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that? We could not have been more different. We were so different, we often said to each other, are you sure you're not adopted? We lived in a small house with one bathroom. We didn't have a lot of money. My parents were at best lower middle class, but we made it work, and we had each other. Lori didn't learn how to swim in country club pools or camp as some of our friends. No, she learned to swim at Shelter Cove, the bay, or in the ocean. There it was sink or swim, and boy did she swim. Lori was an avid swimmer. She was the best. She took the water like fish to water. She also loved to dive off 20 feet diving boards. She perfected the swan dive, while I perfected the belly flop. Her friends from our neighborhood in Hickory Manor were all there, especially her best friend, Diane. When we couldn't find Lori, we didn't send out an Amber Alert or worry or anything like that. We just knew to go over to Diane's house. That's where she'd be. She also grew up with a lot of cousins who we lived very far away from us, so we saw a lot of them at B'nai Mitzvot, weddings, funeral, and vacations. She also enjoyed lifelong long-term friends like the Bernsteins. With Lori, I got an older sister and an automatic babysitter. I loved when my parents went out and left money for dinner. Lori took me to Blimpie's, the sub shop. It's a sub, not a hoagie. It was amazing. For $2, you could get 2 Blimpies, 2 chips, and 2 drinks. Imagine that. We went to Seaside a lot. That is where Lori found her first true love, gambling. She was so lucky at all the wheels and all the games. She took home stuffed animals all the time. Back then, they were very large, much larger than today. My funniest story was when she won a camel. It was a large camel, female, beautiful eyelashes, purple, I believe. It was so big you could put a child on it and it would sit. She got that, she won that, and she brought it to Buffalo. She flew to cousin Linda's bat mitzvah in Buffalo with it. Of course, it was under the plane, and when the plane landed and the luggage all came out of the carousel, there was the luggage and the camel going around and around. The funny part was that people got their luggage but didn't leave because they wanted to see who was going to pick up the camel. Lori was so embarrassed, she had someone else pick it up. I was very proud of my sister. She worked for the New Jersey Casino Control Commission for 30 years. She rose to the top position of principal inspector. Everyone liked her because she was personal, a hard worker, and fair. In the middle of her career, she moved in with Mom to help her out, just temporarily, for 10 years. I loved her for that. She was a very good daughter. She was an incredible daughter. As my older sister, I sometimes needed her approval. Like when I introduced her to my girlfriend, Joanne. Thank God she liked her. Although she knew Charlie in high school, they reunited later in life and eventually got married. Lori was not blessed with children of her own, but she treated her stepson, Matt, and my 3 boys like her own children. I loved her for that, and I loved that I was able to give her that. Boys, all of you, Lori was a second mother to you, and you're in many ways who you are because of her. You will have that forever in your hearts. I hope that consoles you in your grief today. Lori's with God, peaceful and out of pain, in that big casino in heaven. She was a wonderful wife, stepmother, aunt, sister, sister-in-law, cousin, and friend. She will be missed, but always in our hearts. Lehitha wrote, sis, this is for you. See you later.
Now I'm going to ask Laura's nephews, the boys, to come forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. When we think of our Aunt Lori, something that defined her was how she always showed up for those people she cared about. And much of this has already been said, but if you were sick, she would hand deliver homemade soup. If you needed a ride somewhere, she would be over before you hung up the phone. And of course, her famous holiday candies never disappointed. She also never let any of us go back to school without having a full freezer pack filled with meals for a month. She made it a priority to show up for the people in her life, and we know it means so much to her that everyone has showed up for her today. Our Aunt Lori was a constant in our lives since the day we were born. To us, she was more than an aunt, and to her, we were more than nephews. She treated us like her own children. She took us on so many special trips, along with Charlie and Matt, Disney, Turks and Caicos, Dude Ranches, and she was always looking for our next adventure. She was also always ready to pull a practical joke. Her wit and creativity to find new ways to embarrass us were one of the many things that we loved about her, except for when she'd get us good. When I was 8 years old, she entered me into a costume contest dressed as a bag of trash. And in true Aunt Lori fashion, we of course won.
Aunt Lori had an incredible competitive spirit. She loved to compete, always. Whether it be playing ping pong or challenging her to a race in the pool as kids, she never took a spin off her serve or gave us a head start in the pool. She's always a tough out, no matter what the challenge or game was. She always wanted to find the best deal, be the house on the block with the best Halloween decorations and candy, for which she never really had any real competition for, and also send the best care packages when we were away at sleepaway camp. Everyone in our bunks got excited when they saw a package coming from Aunt Lori because they knew there was stuff for everybody in there. Her competitive spirit was never stronger than in her battle with cancer. She was always one of the toughest people we have known, and she fought as hard as anyone. Although she didn't win this one, we were all winners because we had her in our lives. Something we always said in our house was that everyone should have an Aunt Lori. And we were so lucky to have her be ours. Aunt Lori, we love you.
I now call forward Ralph Rulio, who worked together for 30 years with Lori and became a family friend, a very close friend, to come forward.
Last Sunday, Charlie called me and asked me to speak, and two things came to mind immediately. One was what an honor it was to be chosen to speak, and where do I begin? That was the second thing. So I jotted down a few thousand words. Just kidding, just kidding. But me and Lori do go back 45 years to 1979. When we started at the Casino Control Commission, I had just been promoted to senior, and she was on my team. So a senior always takes care of a team. So she was on my first team, and I was her first senior. And I'll tell you, we hit it off right away. And I found her to be a very outspoken, I'll talk about that later, bright, energetic, loving, and most of all, honest. As our careers progressed, she was always loyal to me and always had my back. She kept me from getting into trouble a lot. We both commuted together because we lived in Ocean County, going back and forth to Atlantic City. And by doing so, we learned more and more about each other. And she loved her family very much. And she always said, she always brought up her mom and said how appreciative she was and how Yetta had raised her. And then she always had choice words about her brother Avram. Don't worry, Avram, I won't bring him up. But she did love you, your wife at Kitty's, and how proud she was of her nephews and her stepson, Matt. And of course, as we used to say in Brooklyn, Charlie, forget about it. She was the best thing that ever happened to her, she kept saying over and over again. But she had 20 plus years that was happy and strong. When I said she was outspoken, sometimes she talking nonstop. And we Italians have a word for that. It's called chiacchierone. And we had an assistant chief at one time said about her that she could talk the legs off a chair. But she may not be with us, but the memories will always remain fresh. And there are a lot of fresh memories. And two of them I want to bring up to you. One of them I just heard as we walked in today. Where's Lori Connolly? There, Lori. The two Lori girls, I called them. Two Jewish girls with Irish names. I just could not get my head wrapped around it. Anyway, well, on the way to work one day, I don't know what shift it was, and I fell asleep. I was in the passenger seat, and my hand was over the seat, and Lori painted them with the nail polish. And I spent the whole shift with my left hand in my pocket. That's a practical joke, Rabbi. And the other thing was that she had gone to visit Israel with her cousin. And she came back and told me that she took a side trip past the border into Egypt to a casino, go figure. And while she was there, she didn't like the way the game was being run, so she went to the pit boss and argued the point, and she said got into a heated argument. I said, what? You argued with a male pit boss in a Muslim country? You could have got yourself killed. She goes, I don't care. I was right, and he was wrong. And guess what? I was in the business 30 years, and I don't gamble because I know enough about house advantage, but I would have bet my last dollar that she was right and he was wrong. And her friendship was a privilege of a lifetime. So if you would allow me, I'm also a comfort minister at my parish in St. Barnabas in Bayville, and I facilitated about 300 funerals in the last 14 years. And there's a certain passage I really like, and it would be appropriate for this moment. It's from a gospel according to John chapter 14. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You have faith in God, you also have faith in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. If there were not, would I have told you that I am going to prepare a place for you? And right here is where I talk about Lori. She was such a great individual, a beautiful human being, that I think God did prepare a place for her, but it was on the par with a penthouse. So Lori, your suffering has ended. May you rest in peace forever, my dear, dear friend. Amen.
At this time, I'm going to call forward Bill Pierce, cousin.
After seeing Avram in the voice, I thought I might need this. Everyone was well prepared. The motel has very small paper. I'm very very sad to be here today. I've been to Toms River multiple times in my life, and this is by far the saddest moment. My parents and Lori's parents owned chicken farms in Toms River back in the 40s. And being in this congregation, bringing back memories of my mother, who, when this congregation was in a house on the street, back in the 40s, my mother organized the first religious school in this congregation. And my older brother was born in Toms River. By the time I came along, we had moved to Long Island. But I'm very honored to be able to provide a eulogy. It is a great honor to provide a eulogy for my cousin. The Torah teaches us that at the time of Sarah's death, Father Abraham wept and eulogized his wife. It is a true Jewish tradition. I have truly known Lori all the days of my life. Lori and I were born the same year, the same week, and with less than 48 hours apart. I suspect our parents pushed us in strollers side by side. I don't remember that, of course. We grew up at family gatherings, being seated side by side at the kids' table. Long distance was expensive back then. You didn't do that, so we were like pen pals. We wrote each other letters. They would visit Long Island, we would visit the shore here, and the family would get together frequently at our grandparents' house in Brooklyn. Even after the kids' table, Lori and I always had a great connection. We would seek each other out at any family event, not because of our age, but because we became buddies. We talked about our lives since we were on the same timeline in our ages. We loved each other, we trusted each other. She was my closest cousin and truly my buddy. We kept our friendship going through elementary school and through middle school and through high school and through college. Every time we got together, it was as if we had never been apart, even if it had been 6 months or a year. We talked about our family. We talked about our boyfriends and girlfriends and dating and growing up together. I can concur, Lori was very athletic and very competitive. When we were kids, she always wanted to see who could run faster, who could throw a baseball harder, who could ride a bicycle faster. She also, as others had said, it's interesting, we all have the exact same impression of her, so it must be true. She knew how to tease you also. When we'd get summer jobs in high school, I'd always find her sending a box of saltwater taffy because she worked on the shore here. I got them when I was in college also. And I remember one time when we were at the boardwalk and she's walking down those games of chance, and there was one of these games with those rifles that never target anything. And she said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, you know, what do you want?" And I said, "Well, you know, this." She goes, "Okay." So she go to the thing, put down her money, and the guy who was running the little carny booth said, "I'm only going to let you play once." And she take the rifle out, bing, 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 bing. Okay, I'll take that one. I was impressed. After college, when I was interviewing for schools, I I had an interview at the New York College of Podiatric Medicine, and I took that interview, and I took the bus to New Jersey. She met me at the bus and drove me down here to Toms River, and I stayed with her and Yetta for about a week, and then I had an interview at the school, podiatry school at Temple University, and I said, well, I'll take the bus to Philly. She goes, no, 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 I'm driving you to Philly. She drove me all the way to the door of the school. And then I eventually went to school and did my residency in San Francisco. And when I moved to San Francisco, the very first person who came to visit me in San Francisco, the first guest in my apartment was Lori. And we explored the city together. And it was the weekend of Halloween. And in San Francisco, especially we're talking in the late 70s, Halloween is like a national holiday. They close the streets and the parades and carnival type thing. It's just overwhelming. And we all got in costumes with a bunch of my classmates, and we went down and enjoyed the celebration. And I understand that she always loved Halloween. I don't know if that was part of it, but she always loved Halloween. And through the years, we talked, and long distance was such a big deal, and of course, texting on the telephone made it easy. And I was very honored to be elected the president of the New York State Podiatric Medical Association. And when I was installed, they had a big banquet, and they said, you get so many rooms and so many guests. And of course, my brother and my sister and my mother, bless her soul, was still alive, and my kids and their spouses, and Lori and Charlie. I was very honored that she was able to be there. After all, she helped me get to my first interviews, right? It's a long pathway through. When Lori started dating Charlie, we talked about it. She told me about high school. You were not particularly close in high school, and she apparently teased you. He's rolling his eyes. And, but she told me really good things about Charlie, and she was very excited about the relationship. And I brought my kids down to the wedding, and my daughter, who's now in her 30s, the wedding was 22 years ago, when I told her that I was coming here for the funeral, she talked about the wedding. And she remembered the wedding and the things the DJ did, and a lot of impressions. And I know she talks to Charlie online. When I had troubles in my life, and I went through a very painful divorce, and I confided in my brother and my sister, my family, and Lori. And she comforted me and didn't tell me at the same time that she was starting her battle against cancer. She comforted me when she was facing a possible terminal illness. My memories of Lori are similar to what has been spoken of. And although we never lived in the same city, every time we got together, it was like we had just been together the day before. My sadness today is buffered by a lifetime of happy memories. There's a phrase that we use to comfort people, and we say, may her memory be a blessing. And for me, it most certainly has been one of the best blessings of my life.
Acharon Acharon Chaviv, last but not least, I call forward Charlie. And Matt.
Well, Ralph bought 1,000 words. I brought a book. Okay. You heard all the stories. Lori and I did meet when I transferred down to Toms River South in my junior year. In my senior year, she made it a hobby of antagonizing me beyond belief. You know, one of her biggest pranks, although she denied it forever, was she asked to see my school ring. I didn't have a school ring from Toms River South. I had, they made it up special for me. She goes, let me see. And she clipped it and she took it away from me. And I had to track her down for a week before I could get it back from her, and she gave it back to me. But, you know, we always talked, and then, you know, she went to school. We kind of separated for a while, and then she came back and worked at Kmart. She was working there. So, you know, I would go in there and, you know, she would talk and this and that, and she was doing different things, and she would say something to me, and I'd go find, for those of you who remember the blue light special, I would go find that thing and roll it over to her at the front desk and said, there's something wrong with this thing, and then, you know. But, and that was Lori, and then, you know, Lori got married. You know, I had gotten married, got married again. Lori got divorced, and like I said, we met in the mall, you know, just by chance, and I picked her up immediately, and same with her. We talked, called at home, we talked, and our first actual date, we went to the Office Lounge in Toms River, and we must have been there 3 or 4 hours. We actually closed the place, and then what happened was, she goes, you want to come back to my house, you know? And I'm like, sure, meet my mom. And we, you know, this was really like a first date. I went and met her mom, and Yetta was scrambling to get out of her house coat because all of a sudden, you know, there was no cell phone. So, like, she's like, couldn't figure out, like, what was going on. So, you know, went there, we talked. Actually, we went to Blockbuster first, rented a movie, and then we went there, and Yetta sat down, and we watched a movie, and that was it. And honestly, that was our relationship. You know, we went out more and more. Just like her, she wouldn't say too much about me, and you know, and I didn't introduce Matt to her until a while, and then all of a sudden we just knew we had something. And like everybody says that, you know, when Matt came into our life, he came into her life, and she automatically assumed the job of mom, even though Matt had a mom. You know, that was her. I forgot to say one thing, and I want to bring this up. After I went to Yetta's, I said, you live on Lafayette Avenue. I said, people I used to work for lived on Lafayette Avenue. She goes, who'd you work for? And I said, you know, Burger Town. And she didn't let on that she knew them. And back at that time, before Google, you had Eileen. And that was Lyle's mom. So they called up Eileen, and she goes, oh yeah, he worked me 2 years. I knew his mom, I knew his dad, I knew his brothers, you know, this and that and everything. And she knew everything about me before, like, the second date. So, and then, you know, fast forward, you know, with Matt and Nat, she automatically, no matter what, she was a mom. You cannot take that away from her. And it's, when we used to go out, you know, we'd go somewhere, we'd include Sammy, because Sammy was the same age as my son. And for the longest time, it was Aunt Lori. Sammy called her Aunt Lori. To this day, he calls her Aunt Lori. And, you know, it was just symbiotic. It's just the way it was. When we were first going out, it was a weekend deal because she would take care of her mom during the week, and then we would do something on the weekend. And a lot of times, if we go out, Matt wouldn't want to go out with us, so Matt would stay home with Yet and teach her about Pokemon. And it just worked. You know, the one real quick story was that Lori and I never really wanted to get married. The relationship was working, everything was going good, and her mom kept on saying, before I die, you got to get married. Before I die, you got to get married. And she brought me on this side, and I said, hey, I'd do it. I said, I asked Lori if she wanted to go to Vegas and get married by Elvis. And her mom went nuts. So, you know, it's, and, you know, it was easy. You know, they'll say, I mean, to give you an idea, after we got married, our honeymoon night, the boys stayed in a room with us and trashed the whirlpool tub, you know? So it's the way it was. You know, they say relationships have ups and downs and good and bads. There was goods. There really wasn't any bads. We never got to a point where, you know, got mad or did this. You know, we get mad. And a lot of times she knew how to push my button. So she'd get me to the point where I get mad, and then she'd back off and she'd laugh at me because she'd think it was funny. And that's the way it was. So even through the whole thing, that's, you know, that was her. I used to do a lot of traveling. She used to hold down the fort, you know, at the home. There was never a problem. It was an automatic trust issue between herself and me, and it was never questioned by either one of us. So, you know, if I'm wherever I'm at, she always took care of the fort, and, you know, and that was it. I'll do one quick story. In 2012, she, like every other contest she entered and won, she put in a thing for the Daily News, and it was called Pitch for $1 Million. Okay? And then what happened was they called her back. I'm down in Elton, Virginia, which is near Harrisonburg. I know where it's at, Harrisonburg College, but I was working out there for Merck. She calls me up and she goes, "You got to get home." And I'm going, "Why?" She goes, "I just won a thing, and, you know, I got to go to Yankee Stadium, and Daily News is going to take my picture, and this and that and everything else." I can't. I'm 6 hours away. I go, "When's it going to happen?" It was like the next day. So she called my niece Margaret. Where are you at? I know, I seen right back there. And her and Lori took a car, never going to Yankee Stadium, didn't know where it was, drove into New York, you know, and they did it. And like, I don't know, you've probably seen the pictures with her on the mound and that. So then what happened, a month later when they had the actual contest, it was Lori. Well, before that, I was taking her, she didn't want to embarrass herself, so I was taking her to Lacey High School. I was catching, she was pitching off the mound. And we did that for hours, a straight 2 weeks. And she never got tired, you know, and she just did it. So it came day when we went to Yankee Stadium. They sent a limo down for us, and not like, it's like a stretch wedding limo. There held like 14 people, it was myself and her in it. We go up to Yankee Stadium, we had a box, she went down. They set the mound at 40 feet that she was going to pitch from. And they had this like plastic catcher, and if you got it through the hole, you got $1 million. She finally gets the ball, she backs up to the mound. She gets on the mound, and out of all of them, she was the only one that hit the catcher head on without taking a bounce, but it didn't make the hole, so we didn't get $1 million. But, you know, it's still, it was amazing to see, and that was her. You know, like her ping pong table, it was like, she just like to bring people down just to embarrass them. And it didn't matter. You know, I'd watch, and she'd want to play me. I'm going, "I'm not playing you. I'm not good at ping pong, and I'm not going to have you embarrass me." And, you know, somebody would come over and she'd go, "You play ping pong?" And they go, "Yeah, I'm good at it." I'm sitting there, I'm going, okay, they're going to the den. It's all over. When she did, you know, she was diagnosed in 2010 with lymphoma. And she was actually, back at the time, we had an out-of-the-box doctor and Sloan that would not treat her with chemo. They were using immunotherapies, the first rounds of immunotherapies. And her and 3 other people that were in that project were put into the New England, you know, Journal of Medicine. And the study, which become now immunotherapy, you can't throw a nickel out there without hitting somebody that's on immunotherapy. And within 2 years, she was stage 4 lymphoma. They cleared it. Nothing. And for years, you know, she used to go back to Sloan every year and get it. And when it started coming again, this next time, we were hoping it was lymphoma. You know, we knew something was up. We were just praying it was lymphoma. And because we knew that they could handle that. And when we got the news, we knew it wasn't good. And didn't even miss a beat. She didn't even miss a beat. You know, it is what God dealt me, and she would handle it. She would put stuff about me being sick, but I could never, ever put anything about her being sick because she didn't want it. And it's just like everybody was saying, you know, she didn't want people to look at her differently, and she didn't want a pity party. But again, anybody that needed something, she was there. And I introduced her to a lot of friends. She introduced me to a lot of friends. And, you know, I always go back to this one story, and I forget the exact year. When I was with Rolling Thunder, we used to go down to Washington, D.C. on Memorial Day, and we used to do a run for the wall. And at any given time, I think the least amount was 500,000 bikes, and I think at the end it was close to 1 million bikes that we would get down there. And we had just got done doing parking in the Pentagon lot, and she's sitting there, and she's on the back of my bike, and she looks at me, she goes, "If my mother could see me now, she would never believe it." And so I took a picture of it, you know. But, and that's the way she was. She absolutely supported me through all those years. I absolutely did, you know, the best I could for her. It was easy. It was easy, you know. And I'm just going to end with something. It was out of her favorite song. I'm going to go. And I'm going to put a couple sentences. And it says, "If by chance I should hold her, let me hold her for a time. But if I'm allowed just one possession, I would kick her from the garden." And that was my Lori. You go. You go first if I fall.
We rise now for the memorial prayer. Yamalei rachamim shochem b'amromim Ametzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei Ashkina V'malot kedoshim v'toharim Kezar rakiyam hasirim Et neshamat Lori bat Nechemya v'yeta Shahalaka L'olama Meganen entehem menuchata Ana balarachamim Astireha beseter Kinafecha l'olamim Utzaror b'tzaror hachayim and nishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava V'nomar Amen. El Malei Rachamim, O God exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to our beloved Lori, who is gone now to her eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that she performed in the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bonds of life eternal. God is her portion. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
gentleman